For 40 years, I protected my family. I built a company from a Brooklyn kitchen and stayed anonymous so my son could have his own success. I paid tuition for colleagues' children. I co-signed mortgages during hard times. I gave everything and asked for nothing in return. Then my daughter-in-law stood in my son's penthouse, wearing my vintage coat, and erased me from the company history. 8 hands rose to vote me out of my own creation. One of those hands belonged to my son. They thought I was a confused old woman who would go quietly. They had no idea I held the only signature that could make their $85 million deal legal. If you have ever been underestimated by people you loved, stay with me. I am 65 years old. To understand what happened next, I need to take you back to where it started. Thank you for being here with me. Before we begin, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better? I read every comment. Just a quick note, some details are adjusted for storytelling. What matters most is the message it carries. I sat in the corner of a room I had decorated myself, watching a woman in my vintage coat erase 40 years of my existence from a PowerPoint slide. The penthouse belonged to my son. The furniture belonged to my taste. The 20 people filling the space belonged to the company I had built from a Brooklyn kitchen in 1984. And the woman standing before the projection screen, gesturing at a timeline that erased my name, belonged to my son's bed. I am Eleanor Ashford, 65 years old, the invisible architect of an $85 million fashion empire that the world knows as Maison Ilara. The name Ilara was my mother's name. I gave it to my first collection when I was 25. Sketching dresses on a countertop smaller than this penthouse's bathroom. No one in this room knew that. No one was supposed to. Simone Ashford stood before the screen with the confidence of someone who had already won. 38 years old. Dressed in a vintage Maison Ilara piece from our 1992 spring collection. My daughter-in-law commanded the room like she had built it herself. The coat she wore was one I had designed during a fever dream in Paris, stitching until my fingers bled. She had found it in storage and claimed it as her own aesthetic. This is the heritage we're building on, Simone said. Clicking to the next slide, the Ilara Collective vision that started it all. The Ilara Collective, not Eleanor Ashford, not even a founder's name, a collective, as if my life's work had emerged from committee. No one offered me a drink. No one asked if I needed a chair closer to the screen. I counted the faces I had helped over the years. 7 of them owed their children's tuition to checks I had quietly signed. You want to know what 40 years of silence sounds like? It sounds like applause for someone else wearing your work. My son sat beside his wife without meeting my eyes. Vincent Ashford, 42 years old, wearing the CEO title I had handed him 5 years ago when I decided to step back from daily operations. I had thought stepping back meant trust. I had thought it meant rest. I had not realized it meant erasure. Vincent's jaw was tight. His hands were folded. He looked at the screen, at his wife, at the board members nodding along. He looked everywhere except at the corner where his mother sat in shadow. The presentation continued. Simone walked through market projections, brand positioning, acquisition strategy. She used words like legacy and heritage and founding vision without once mentioning who had founded anything. The slides showed our signature cuts, our iconic silhouettes, our revolutionary approach to sustainable luxury. They showed everything I had created and nothing of who created it. I watched the room watch her. I watched them nod and murmur approval. I watched them forget I was there. How do you erase a person who built everything you're standing on? You do it slowly. You do it with slides and speeches and careful omissions. You do it by never saying a name out loud until no one remembers there was a name to say. But one person remembered. Celeste sat in the opposite corner, as invisible as I was. My granddaughter. 14 years old, with my observant eyes and her father's stubborn jaw. She held a blue notebook in her lap, and while everyone else watched Simone, Celeste watched me. Our eyes met across the room. She did not smile. She did not wave. She simply looked at me with an expression that asked the question no one else dared. Do you see what they are doing to you? I saw. I had been seeing for months, perhaps years. Celeste's pen moved across her notebook page. She was writing something down. I wondered what she recorded in those pages. I wondered if she was the only person in this family who still knew how to pay attention. Simone clicked to the final slide. "And now for the exciting news," she announced. "The Maison Laurent acquisition. $85 million. The signatures we need are ready." The slide displayed 3 names in elegant typography. Vincent Ashford, CEO. Simone Ashford, Creative Director. Harrison Webb, Company Counsel. 3 signatures that would transfer ownership, merge assets, and reshape everything I had built. 3 signatures. Not one of them could make the deal legal. Only mine could do that. I read each name on that slide. I read the acquisition terms and the timeline and the celebration already being planned for the BST fashion show next week. I read my own absence like a prophecy they had written without understanding the ending. The company charter I had drawn up in 1984 contained a clause no one had bothered to read. Clause 19B. Any transfer of controlling interest required the authenticated signature of the founding designer, not the CEO, not the creative director, the founder. Simone smiled at the room, waiting for applause. The board members obliged. My name was not on that slide, but my name was the only signature that could make any of it real. And not a single person in that room knew it yet. Celeste's eyes found mine again. Her pen stopped moving. I sat perfectly still in my corner, in my shadow, in my silence. I had spent 40 years being invisible. I had spent 40 years letting others take credit, take bows, take everything. But they had made one mistake. They had forgotten that invisible does not mean powerless. Simone cleared her throat and smiled. "Now," she said, "just a bit of housekeeping before we adjourn." Simone set down her clicker and turned to the room with the smile of someone about to do violence politely. "Just a small matter of housekeeping," she said. Her voice carried the practiced warmth of a woman who had rehearsed cruelty until it sounded like kindness. As we move into this exciting new chapter, we need to ensure brand consistency. Those not directly involved in the current creative process should step back from public-facing events. She looked directly at me. The room understood. 20 faces shifted in my direction, then quickly away. No one wanted to be caught watching the execution. We need to protect the energy of this transition. Simone continued, "Some legacies are best honored from a distance." I watched her mouth form each word. She had rehearsed this. Probably in my son's bathroom mirror, practicing the angle of her chin, the softness of her expression. She had learned to make exile sound like a gift. For the BST launch and the signing ceremony, I moved that we limit attendance to active leadership. All in favor? The hands went up. I counted them. Margaret Holloway, whose daughter's Parsons tuition I had covered when her husband left. Thomas Reed, whose mortgage I had co-signed during the 2008 crash. Janet Woodford, whose son's rehab I had funded without ever asking for thanks. 8 hands. 8 faces that could not meet my eyes. 8 debts that would never be collected now. Have you ever watched your own child choose a stranger over you? The hand goes up so slowly, you think maybe you imagined it. Vincent's hand rose last. His eyes stayed fixed on the floor, on his shoes, on anything that was not his mother's face. His jaw was tight. His hand trembled slightly as it lifted into the air. I had given him that company. I had built it from nothing and handed it to him because I believed he was ready. I had stepped back so he could step forward. And now his hand was in the air, voting me out of my own creation. Simone's smile widened. Motion carries. Thank you all for your support during this transition. Across the room. Celeste's pen moved across her notebook page. She was recording everything. Every hand, every face, every small betrayal that the adults thought no one was watching. I stood up. The room went quiet. They expected me to cry, to argue, to give them a scene they could use against me later. They expected the wounded mother, the bitter founder, the woman who could not let go. I gave them nothing but the sound of my heels on marble. I gathered my coat. I did not look at Vincent. I did not acknowledge Simone. I walked toward the door with the same posture I had maintained for 40 years of board meetings and fashion shows and contract negotiations. At the threshold, I paused. My eyes found Celeste's across the room. She had stopped writing. Her gaze held mine for 3 heartbeats. In that look was everything neither of us could say aloud. Then I walked out into the Manhattan night. Silence is the only weapon they cannot confiscate at the door. The elevator carried me down 32 floors. The lobby doorman nodded without meeting my eyes. Word traveled fast in buildings like this. By morning, everyone would know that Eleanor Ashford had been voted out of her own company's celebration. I hailed a cab. I gave my address. I watched the city lights blur past the window and felt nothing. Not yet. The feeling would come later, in the dark, when I could afford it. My apartment was silent when I entered. The view of Central Park stretched beyond my windows, the same view I had watched for 23 years. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon and did not drink it. Instead, I opened my laptop. The encrypted folder was labeled with a single word, Alara. I had created it 2 years ago, on a night very much like this one. When I first noticed Simone's fingerprints on decisions that should have been Vincent's, I had hoped I would never need it. 2 years. I had been preparing for this exact night for 2 years. The file was 47 pages long. Legal precedents, financial records, communication logs. Every clause of the company charter I had written in 1984, annotated with notes about exactly how it could be weaponized. I picked up my phone and opened the encrypted app. The number I dialed belonged to Jacqueline Mercer, 58 years old and partner at the most ruthless intellectual property firm in Manhattan. She had been waiting for this call. She answered on the first ring. Alara protocol, I said. Full activation. A pause. All of it. All of it. I will have the team assembled by morning. I ended the call and stared at the bourbon I still had not touched. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, but the pattern of the call was familiar. An old pattern, a signal we had established decades ago. I answered. The voice on the other end was 71 years old, roughened by time and cigarettes and 40 years of secrets. But it was sharp as the day we had signed our first contract together in a Brooklyn kitchen. I watched the live stream, he said. Your daughter-in-law does not have the sense God gave a goat, despite everything. I almost smiled. Bernard, when do we begin? I looked at the 47 pages glowing on my screen. I looked at the city lights beyond my window. I thought of my son's hand rising into the air. Tomorrow, I said. We begin tomorrow. By 8 the next morning, Simone had already turned my exile into content. I sat at my kitchen table, with black coffee going cold, watching her Instagram live on my tablet. Bernard and I had talked until 2 in the morning, mapping out the first phase of the Alara protocol. Now, I was watching my daughter-in-law rewrite history in real time. She wore a vintage piece from our 1992 collection. Her hair was artfully messy, the kind of casual that takes an hour to achieve. Behind her, I could see the penthouse windows where I had sat, invisible, just 12 hours before. This is our brand now, Simone said to the camera. The Alara Collective belongs to this generation. We are honoring the past by building something bigger, something bolder. The comments scrolled past faster than I could read them. Heart emojis, fire emojis, words like queen and finally, and the future is female leadership. One comment froze me mid-sip. Thank God the obstacle is finally out of the way. The obstacle. That was me. 40 years of 18-hour days, of bleeding fingers and sleepless nights, and designs that changed the industry. Reduced to an obstacle. 200,000 followers watched her speak. Not one of them knew my face. Not one of them knew that the vintage coat she wore had been stitched by my hands in a fever dream in Paris. Not one of them knew that the name Alara belonged to my mother, not to some collective invented by marketing consultants. How do you grieve a reputation you never claimed? They erased a name most of them had never even seen. I set down the tablet and opened my laptop. The encrypted folder from last night waited for me. I created a new file and titled it simply Voter Registry. 8 names, 8 hands that had risen against me, for each one. I typed the financial connection they had apparently forgotten. Carla Hendricks. I had written a check for $47,000 to cover her daughter's design program tuition when Carla's husband emptied their savings and disappeared. Her hand went up without hesitation. Marcus Webb. I had co-signed his gallery lease when no bank would touch him after his bankruptcy. His hand went up third. Thomas Reed. Margaret Holloway. Janet Woodford. Name after name. Debt after debt. These were people I had helped without asking for anything in return. I had never intended to collect on their gratitude, but I had also never imagined they would repay me by voting me into exile. The phone on my kitchen counter had been silent all morning, but it had not been silent all night. At 1:47 a.m., while I was still on the call with Bernard, a text had arrived. I had seen the notification, but not opened it until now. Vincent's name. 3 lines. I'm sorry. I didn't know she would do that. I need to talk to you alone. My son's name on my phone. 3 words that cost him nothing to type and everything for me to read. I stared at the message for 3 full minutes. The cursor blinked. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed 1 word. When? Then deleted it. Typed, call me. Deleted that too. What was I supposed to say? That I forgave him? I did not. Not yet. That I understood? I did not understand how my own child could raise his hand against me while staring at the floor. But there was something in those 3 lines. Something that Simone would not have let him send if she had known about it. He had texted at nearly 2 in the morning. He had asked to talk alone. Not with her. Alone. I screenshotted the message and saved it to the encrypted folder. Evidence of regret. Sitting right next to evidence of conspiracy. Then I typed a single word and sent it. Wait. The phone stayed silent after that. I did not expect a reply. I was not sure I wanted one. Not yet. I walked to my window and looked out at Central Park. The trees were summer green. The paths full of joggers and dog walkers and tourists who had no idea that somewhere on the Upper West Side, a 65-year-old woman was planning a war. Silence is not surrender. Silence is the room where you reload. 42 years I had protected my son. I had shielded him from the parts of the business that would have broken him. I had given him a company and stepped aside so he could grow into it. And now, I had to let him feel the weight of what he had done. Love without boundaries had gotten me voted out of my own legacy. Love without strategy had made me invisible in a room I designed. I would not make that mistake again. My phone buzzed. Not Vincent, Bernard. Jacqueline has the preliminary findings. Monday, 9 a.m. Her office. You need to see what Simone has been doing with the trademark filings. I typed back, I will be there. The coffee had gone completely cold. I poured it down the sink and started a fresh pot. Outside, Manhattan was waking up to a Saturday that would pass like any other. But inside my apartment, in an encrypted folder on my laptop, my son's midnight apology sat next to the 47 pages that would bring down his wife. The question was whether he was reaching out as my child or as her spy. Jacqueline Mercer spread 3 folders across the conference table like a surgeon laying out instruments before an operation. I had spent Sunday deciding whether my son's midnight apology was genuine or calculated. By Monday morning, sitting in Jacqueline's office at Harrington and Wolff, I realized it no longer mattered. The evidence in front of me made Vincent's loyalties irrelevant. His wife had been building a trap long before any of us saw it coming. First folder, Jacqueline said. She slid it toward me with the calm of someone who had delivered bad news professionally for 30 years. Trademark filing. USPTO records show that 18 months ago, Simone personally filed to register Maison Elara under her own name, not the company. Her. I opened the folder, my mother's name, typed in official government forms, with my daughter-in-law's signature at the bottom. If this filing completes, Jacqueline continued, the brand identity legally separates from the company you founded. She could license the name back to Maison Elara at whatever rate she chooses. Or she could walk away with it entirely. 18 months. She had been erasing me for 18 months before anyone raised a hand at that board meeting. Before the vote. Before the live stream. Before any of it. Second folder. Jacqueline's voice stayed level. Her credentials. This folder was thinner. A single page. I recognized the document immediately. Simone's official biography, the one that appeared on the company website, in press releases, in every interview she had ever given. Graduated with honors from the Académie Lumière Paris. 5 years of European training. Protégé of masters whose names I had never bothered to verify. The Académie Lumière Paris does not exist, Jacqueline said. My investigator found a website and a P.O. box in Delaware. The accreditation registry has no record of any institution by that name in France. The school is a diploma mill. Her degree is worth less than the paper it is printed on. I set the page down carefully. 5 years. She had called herself creative director for 5 years. She had worn my vintage pieces and claimed my aesthetic, and presented herself as the rightful heir to a legacy she had no qualifications to touch. The only thing she had ever created was her credentials. Third folder. Jacqueline pushed it across the table. This is the one that matters most. I opened it. The acquisition contract with Maison Laurent Paris. 87 pages of legal language I had helped draft 2 years ago, back when I still believed Vincent would protect what I had built. Jacqueline pointed to page 34, a single clause, buried in a paragraph about transaction thresholds. Founding designer signature, mandatory for any transaction exceeding $10 million, she read aloud. Simone's lawyers either missed it or did not understand what it meant. She has spent 6 months negotiating an $85 million deal she cannot legally close. When you build traps, you must remember where you buried them. I remembered. I had written that clause myself, inserted it quietly during a contract review 2 years ago, when I first noticed Simone's fingerprints on decisions that should have been Vincent's. I had hoped I would never need it, but I had learned long ago that hope is not a strategy. She cannot close without me, I said. She cannot close without you. I closed the folder and looked out the window at Midtown Manhattan, somewhere in this city. Simone was preparing for a victory that would never come, and she had no idea. That afternoon, I sat in a cafe near Central Park, waiting for a guest I had not expected. Celeste arrived alone. No driver, no parents. She wore her school uniform and carried a blue notebook I recognized from Friday night. She slid into the chair across from me and placed the notebook on the table without a word. I wrote down everything, she said. Everything they said about you when they thought I was not listening. I opened to a random page. The handwriting was careful, deliberate, a child's penmanship that had grown steadier over years. March 15th, 2023, I read aloud. Mom said Grandma does not understand modern business. Dad did not disagree. I turned more pages. Dates, quotes, observations. 3 years of entries, starting when Celeste was 11 years old. She had documented every dismissal, every eye roll, every time someone in my own family had treated me like an obstacle to be managed. A 14-year-old had done what no adult in my family had the courage to do. She paid attention. I knew you were not bad. Grandma, Celeste said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. I just did not know how to help. I reached across the table and took her hand. 14 years old. 3 years of watching. 3 years of writing down the truth, because no one else would. You helped, I said. More than you know. She squeezed my hand once, then let go. What are you going to do? I looked at the notebook. 3 years of truth in a child's handwriting. Dates, quotes, witnesses. This was not just evidence. This was the record of a family that had convinced itself I was the problem. And now I had proof that at least one of them had always known better. I am going to remind them, I said, who built everything they are trying to take. The call from Paris came at 6:30 in the morning, early enough to catch me before coffee, late enough to prove they had read the fine print. I had spent the night with Celeste's notebook open on my lap, reading 3 years of a child's observations. Now I set it aside and answered the phone with a voice that betrayed nothing. The man on the line introduced himself as counsel from Maison Laurent Paris. His English was precise, his tone carefully neutral. We have reviewed the Maison Elara corporate charter, he said. Clause 7. 4 requires the founding designer's signature for any transaction exceeding $10 million. We want to confirm you will be present at Friday's signing. I let the silence stretch for 3 heartbeats. You found that clause. It was not difficult to find. Madame Ashford, it is quite clearly stated on page 12. Page 12. Simone's lawyers had negotiated for 6 months and never made it past the table of contents. The Paris team had done what no one on her side had bothered to do. They read the document. "I will be present," I said. "Excellent. We look forward to completing this partnership." I hung up and stood at my window, watching the sun rise over Central Park, somewhere across the city. Simone was probably still asleep, dreaming of her victory lap. She had no idea that the deal she had been celebrating could not close without the woman she had voted to exile. Here is what 40 years in business teaches you. The person who reads the footnotes wins. I made tea and sat down with my laptop. The Alara protocol file was open, updated with everything Jacqueline had shown me yesterday. The trademark filing, the fabricated credentials, the contract clause that Simone's team had missed. And now, Celeste's notebook photographed page by page and stored in the encrypted folder. I mapped out the battlefield in my mind. Simone knew she needed the acquisition to close. She did not know she needed me. Vincent knew he had texted an apology in the dark. He did not know I had screenshotted it as evidence. The Paris team knew the signature was mandatory. They did not know that the woman who held it had been publicly humiliated 3 days ago. Knowledge is only power when your enemy does not know you have it. At 11 that morning, my phone buzzed with a video call request. Simone's name. Her profile picture showed her at some charity gala, champagne raised, smile perfect. I answered. She appeared on my screen with camera-ready makeup and the practiced warmth she reserved for investors and in-laws she needed. Something from behind her. I recognized Vincent's penthouse, the same room where I had sat invisible 3 days before. "Mom," she said. The word sounded expensive in her mouth. "I hope I am not catching you at a bad time." "Not at all." I wanted to reach out about Friday's signing. There is a bit of housekeeping the lawyers want to tidy up beforehand. Just a simple administrative form. Do you know the difference between a con artist and a businesswoman? The con artist believes her own smile. What kind of form? I kept my voice pleasant. Curious. The voice of a woman who had not spent the last 3 days preparing for exactly this moment. Nothing major. Her hand waved dismissively. Just a transfer of founding representative rights to the CEO. Vincent's position. Technically, but the lawyers want everything streamlined. One signature and the whole process runs smoother. One signature. Transfer of founding representative rights. She wanted me to sign away the very clause that gave me power over the deal before I realized I had it. I recognized the trap immediately. If I signed that document, the Paris team would no longer need me at Friday's meeting. Simone could close the acquisition without my presence, my consent, or my knowledge of what she had done to steal my life's work. "Send it to Jacqueline," I said. "I will have an answer within 24 hours. Her smile flickered, just for a moment. She had expected immediate compliance. The old Eleanor who signed whatever her family put in front of her, or immediate refusal. The bitter Eleanor she could paint as obstructionist. She had not expected calm referral to counsel. It gave her nothing to work with. Never refuse a trap outright. Let them think it is still set while you walk around it. "Of course," Simone said, recovering. "I will send it right over. I am sure it is all very straightforward." "I am sure it is." We smiled at each other through the screen. Two women who both knew the other was lying. The call ended. I screenshotted the call log and added it to the evidence folder. Timestamp, duration, the record of a woman trying to steal the last piece of power I had left. She would send the document. Jacqueline would find every poison clause buried in its pages. And when Simone realized I had not signed, when she finally understood that the deal required my hand on the line, she would have to come to me directly. The question was whether she would come with an apology or a weapon. My encrypted phone buzzed. A text from Bernard. "Arriving JFK tomorrow noon. Bringing the original documents." Time we reminded them who built this. The phone rang at 11:45 that night, the same encrypted number. But this time, the voice on the other end was no longer a ghost from the past. It was present tense. It was here. "I saw her in that coat," Bernard said. His voice was clearer now, closer than any overseas call. "The one we finished at 3 in the morning in your kitchen, arguing over the button placement. You wanted brass, I wanted bone. We compromised on pearl." I closed my eyes. The 1997 spring collection. That coat had taken us 17 hours of straight work, fueled by bad coffee and the certainty that we were building something that would last. She called it part of the Alara collective heritage, I said. She does not know what heritage means. His voice hardened. Clause 14, Section 3. My signature still carries legal weight. You did not forget that, did you? I had not forgotten. I had simply not allowed myself to hope that it still mattered. Where are you calling from? A pause. I landed at JFK this morning. I am at the Beacon Hotel on 72nd Street, room 714. I sat down slowly. Bernard Sinclair, 71 years old. My partner from 1984 to 2009. 25 years of shared decisions, shared signatures, shared sleepless nights turning fabric into something people would remember. He had been there when I named the company after my mother. He had been there when we sold our first piece to a department store buyer who told us we would never make it. He had been there for everything. 15 years. That is how long I had been carrying this weight alone, thinking I had no choice. Why did you come back? I asked. Because someone is wearing our coat and pretending she made it. And because you sounded tired on the phone the other night. You should not sound tired. You built an empire. I hung up and sat in darkness for a long time. Through my window, the city lights flickered like they had in 1984. When Bernard and I had signed our founding contract in a Brooklyn kitchen that smelled of fabric dye and possibility, when he left for Zurich after his wife's illness, I told myself I could carry it alone. I had been wrong, but I had not known that until tonight. Wednesday morning, I walked into the hotel cafe on 72nd Street. Bernard sat at a corner table near the window, silver hair catching the early light. His posture was the same, straight-backed, watchful, the posture of a man who had spent decades catching mistakes before they became disasters. 15 years older. But the mind behind those sharp eyes had not changed. He stood when he saw me. We embraced briefly. His hands were still calloused from years of working with fabric. You look exactly like you did in 1985, he said. Except now, you look like you are about to destroy someone. You look like you came to help. I came because someone is wearing our coat and pretending she made it. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. I brought you something. Some partnerships survive silence. Ours had survived an ocean and a decade of grief. I sat. The waiter brought coffee without being asked. Bernard had always known how to arrange things before they needed arranging. He slid a manila envelope across the table. The paper was yellowed at the edges. I recognized the typeface before I opened it. The original, Bernard said, from the Zurich vault. I never amended it, never transferred my rights. I opened the envelope and pulled out the document. The founding contract of Maison Alara, dated September 3rd, 1984. 2 names at the top, Eleanor Ashford and Bernard Sinclair. 2 signatures at the bottom, both still legally binding. I traced my signature from 40 years ago. The ink had faded slightly, but the lines were still clear. My mother's name sat at the top of the page, transformed into a brand that now commanded millions. 8% of original shares, Bernard said quietly. Still mine. And according to Clause 14, Section 3, both founding partners must approve any transaction exceeding $10 million. Both signatures, both. 2 signatures. They needed 2 signatures they did not know existed. I looked up at him. Simone's lawyers never found this. Simone's lawyers never looked for what they assumed did not exist. They think you are the only founder. They do not know I am still on the paperwork. He sipped his coffee. They do not know I am in New York. The acquisition could not close without me, but it also could not close without Bernard. 2 gatekeepers instead of 1. 2 signatures that Simone had never bothered to research. Thursday night is their fashion show, Bernard said. The signing is Friday morning. We have less than 48 hours to decide how much damage we want to do. I looked at the man who had helped me build everything. 25 years of partnership. 15 years of silence. And now, in the final hour, he had crossed an ocean to stand beside me again. All of it, I said. I want to do all of it. Bernard smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who had been waiting 15 years for permission to burn something down. "Good," he said. "Then let us talk about how we make her regret ever putting on that coat." The security guard's hand came up like a traffic cop. "Ma'am, this is a private building." I looked past him at the lobby I had sketched on a napkin 40 years ago, the spiral staircase I had argued over for 6 months, my initials still embedded in the marble floor, hidden in the geometric pattern where only I knew to look. Bernard and I had spent the morning planning our strategy. Now I was being stopped at the door of my own creation. "I have an appointment with Vincent Ashford," I said. The guard checked his tablet. "Eleanor Ashford, visitor. I'll need to announce you." Visitor. In the building I designed. In the company I built. I smiled and said nothing. He escorted me to the elevator. As we passed the second-floor landing, a memory struck like a blade, teaching 4-year-old Vincent to count these stairs, his small hand in mine, his voice saying, "Mommy's castle." The guard's walkie-talkie crackled, shattering the image. Vincent's office door was open. He stood behind his desk, tie loosened, looking like a man who had not slept well. When he saw me, something flickered across his face. Guilt, relief, fear, all three, maybe. "Mom," he gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." I sat. The leather was smooth under my palms. I had chosen these chairs 20 years ago, imagining my son sitting behind this desk. I had not imagined him looking at me like I was a problem to be managed. "I need to talk to you about the acquisition," he said. His voice was rehearsed, corporate. "We need your cooperation for the family's sake. The lawyers have a document." The transfer document Simone sent to my attorney. He blinked. "You know about that." "I know about many things, Vincent." I kept my voice gentle. "What did she tell you about why I need to sign it?" His jaw tightened. "Mom, the doctors." "What doctors?" His eyes flickered. The script was failing. "Simone said she mentioned that sometimes, at a certain age, decisions become difficult, that signing authority should transfer to someone who can. She told you I have cognitive decline." The silence confirmed it. My daughter-in-law had convinced my son that I was losing my mind. Every protective instinct he had was being reframed as elder care. Every question I raised was evidence of confusion. I walked to the window, the one I had selected for this office, specifically because it faced Central Park. The view I had chosen for my future CEO son, 20 years before he ever sat in this chair. My reflection overlapped with a framed photo of Simone on his desk. 2 women who had shaped this man, merging into one image. "Do I seem confused to you, Vincent?" Before he could answer, the door opened. Simone entered with the precision of someone who had been waiting outside. Her smile was camera-ready. Her timing was not coincidental. "Eleanor," she said, "what a surprise! I did not realize you were coming today." "Your husband invited me." She walked past Vincent and sat in his chair. He did not object. He simply moved aside, becoming a background character in his own office. I watched my son diminish in real time. Simone in that chair triggered something visceral. I had sat the same way when I ran this company. But I had built what I sat upon. She was wearing a costume of power, borrowed authority draped over fabricated credentials. The difference between a founder and a fraud is invisible to everyone except another founder. "Let's be direct," Simone said. "We know about your meeting with Bernard Sinclair." I said nothing. "The Beacon Hotel, Wednesday morning, 8 a.m. She smiled. "Shall I tell you what you ordered?" "You have been following me. We have been protecting Vincent from exploitation." Her voice was silk over steel. An elderly woman, estranged from her family, suddenly reconnecting with an old business partner. The pattern is concerning. She had been tracking me for weeks. She knew about Bernard. She probably knew about Jacqueline, about the encrypted calls, about every move I had made since the board meeting. And she was afraid. I laughed. A genuine laugh, not performed. It startled her. "You have been watching me for weeks," I said, "and you still invited me here. Which means you need something I have that surveillance cannot steal." Her composure cracked just for a moment, a flicker in her eyes. The recognition that I was not the confused old woman she had been advertising. "This meeting is over," she said. "Yes," I agreed. "It is." I walked out of Vincent's office without looking back. In the corridor, I passed a young woman carrying a tablet. Renata Vance, 30 years old, Simone's executive assistant. I had seen her name on org charts. Our eyes met for half a second. Something passed between us without words. In the elevator. Alone. I felt a weight in my coat pocket that had not been there before. I pulled out a folded paper, opened it, a time, a place, and 2 words in handwriting I did not recognize. "She's scared." I looked at the security camera in the corner of the elevator. Whoever was watching saw me smile. Something had just changed. Someone inside Maison Elara had made contact. And Simone, with all her surveillance and all her schemes, had no idea that her own assistant had just handed me a weapon. The note from Renata had said, "She's scared." By 11:47 that night, I understood why. My phone buzzed with an encrypted signal message from an unknown number. The opening line made my breath catch. "You designed the spiral staircase to have exactly 42 steps. One for every year you plan to run the company." No one knew that. Not Vincent, not any board member. I had never told anyone except Bernard. 40 years ago, when we first sketched the headquarters design, someone inside Maison Elara had been paying very close attention. I typed back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. "Renata Vance, I passed you the note. I need to show you something. Encrypted video call in 2 minutes." I sat in my dark apartment, the glow of the phone screen the only light. When the video call connected, I saw Renata's face pixelated slightly. The feed compressed for security. She was in what looked like a bathroom, speaking barely above a whisper. "How do you know about the stairs?" I asked. "Because she brags about erasing you." Renata's voice was steady despite the whisper. "Simone shows people the staircase and says it was designed by committee. She laughs about how no one will ever know the truth. I have been documenting everything for 18 months. My hands were not shaking. That surprised me more than the message itself. "Why are you helping me?" Renata's expression shifted. Something personal surfaced in her eyes. 5 years ago, my mother ran a catering business. Small, successful, 23 employees. Simone wanted her as the exclusive vendor for Maison Elara events. When my mother refused to give a 60% discount, Simone made calls. Within 6 months, every major venue in Manhattan had blacklisted her. My mother lost everything. She paused. Different industry, same playbook. Simone destroys anyone who does not bend. How many women had Simone crushed before she found her way to my family? "What do you have?" I asked. "Tomorrow night at the BST fashion show." Renata leaned closer to the camera. "She is going to announce your voluntary retirement. She has a document with your forged signature dated 3 weeks ago. Transfer of all founding rights to the CEO. She plans to project it on the main screen, 500 witnesses, full press coverage, a forged signature. 3 weeks ago. I had not signed anything. I had not even spoken to Simone 3 weeks ago. You have seen this document. I photographed it yesterday. I have timestamps, file locations, everything. The ink analysis will prove it is recent. She is going to commit forgery in front of every fashion journalist in New York. I sat back in my chair. The pieces were falling into place exactly as I had anticipated. Simone thought she was executing a masterstroke. She did not realize she was walking into a trap I had begun setting 2 years ago. "Renata," I said, "I need you to do something very difficult. Name it. Let her proceed. Do nothing to stop her. Let her announce the retirement. Let her wave that document in front of the cameras. Let her commit to the lie completely." Silence on the other end. "Then, you want her to go through with the forgery?" "Publicly. I want witnesses, hundreds of them. Every journalist, every photographer, every board member in that room will see her present a document she forged. And then, when I walk into Friday's signing meeting with the original founding contract, the one that requires my authentic signature, every single one of those witnesses becomes evidence of fraud. Chess requires sacrifice, but I was not sacrificing pieces. I was letting my opponent believe she had already won. My legal team has forensic document analysts on standby. I continued. The moment she presents that forged signature, we start the clock. By Friday morning, she will have committed commercial fraud in front of 500 witnesses. By Friday afternoon, she will be facing criminal referral. Renata exhaled slowly. You anticipated this. I anticipated her. There is a difference. What do you need from me? Stay in position. Continue documenting. When the signing meeting happens Friday, I need to know exactly who is in the room and what documents they bring. I can do that. I was about to end the call when Renata's expression changed. The confidence wavered. There is one more thing, she said. Your granddaughter, Celeste. She has been asking questions at the office, coming by after school, talking to employees about old company history. Simone noticed. My granddaughter, 14 years old, in that building, with that woman watching. What kind of questions? About the founding, about the original designs, about you. Renata's voice dropped even lower. Simone pulled her employee badge access logs. She knows Celeste has been coming by. The cold precision I had felt moments ago transformed into something hotter, more dangerous. My granddaughter was doing exactly what I would have done at her age. Investigating, documenting, gathering evidence in her blue notebook. And Simone had noticed. Does Simone know why Celeste is asking? Not yet, but she is watching her now. The call disconnected. I sat in darkness, the phone screen fading to black. Tomorrow night, Simone would commit forgery in front of 500 witnesses. Friday morning, I would walk into that signing meeting with 40 years of truth in my hands. But first, I needed to protect my granddaughter from a woman who had already proven she would destroy anyone in her path. I spent Thursday making calls to Celeste's school, to the family's doorman, to anyone who might shield my granddaughter from Simone's attention. By evening, I had done what I could. Now it was time to do what I had planned. The founding member badge was 40 years old, the leather cracked, the gold tarnished, but it still opened the Metropolitan Club's private entrance. The BST fashion show was in full swing when I walked through the side door. 500 guests filled the main hall, champagne glasses glinting under runway lights. Simone's collection moved down the catwalk. My aesthetic, filtered through someone else's hands, presented as if it had always belonged to her. I walked straight down the center aisle. The first person to notice was a waiter, then a photographer, then Margaret Holloway, 73 years old, and one of the few industry veterans who remembered my face from the early days. Her champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Eleanor! The word carried across 3 rows of seats. Heads turned. Whispers rippled. The model on the runway stumbled, distracted by the sudden shift in attention. Within seconds, every eye in the room had found me. 40 years of invisibility ended in 3 seconds of silence. Simone stood at the edge of the runway, microphone in hand, frozen mid-sentence. Her face cycled through confusion, recognition, fury, all in the space of a heartbeat. Security was supposed to. Her voice cracked. Founding members do not need invitations, I said. My voice carried clearly in the sudden quiet. We wrote the guest list. The room erupted, not in chaos, but in the controlled commotion of 500 people suddenly realizing they were witnessing something far more interesting than a fashion show. Phones appeared. Cameras swung toward me. The press section leaned forward as one. Simone recovered quickly. She handed the microphone to an assistant and walked toward me with the measured pace of someone trying to appear calm. Her hand closed around my elbow. Backstage, she hissed. Now! She steered me through a side door, away from the cameras. The backstage area smelled of hairspray and tension. Racks of clothing lined the walls. Half-dressed models scattered at our approach. You are trespassing, Simone said. Her voice had dropped to ice. I will have you arrested. I reached into my coat pocket and produced the leather badge case. The founding member insignia caught the light. Arrest the woman whose signature is on every founding document in this organization. I opened the case, revealing not just the badge, but a folded paper beneath it. The original Articles of Incorporation dated 1984. Please, call the press too. I would love to explain to them exactly who built what you are standing on. Simone's hand was still on my arm. I looked at it. She removed it. What do you want? She demanded. I want what I have always wanted. Acknowledgement. Respect. My signature on documents that cannot legally proceed without it. I tucked the papers back into my coat. You knew this would happen eventually. You just hoped I would die quiet. You have no idea what you are interfering with. I have every idea. I have had every idea since the moment you filed to trademark my mother's name under your personal signature. Her face went white. She had not known I knew about that. The backstage door swung open. Vincent stepped through, his face tight with confusion. He looked from his wife to his mother and back again. What is happening? Someone said Mom was... He stopped, saw me. Mom, Vincent. I kept my voice steady. Your wife was just explaining why I should be arrested for entering a building I helped found. Vincent, remove her. Simone's command was sharp. She is disrupting the event. Vincent did not move. Remove her, Simone repeated. Now. I looked at my son, 42 years old, the boy I had taught to count stairs in this very club, the man I had handed a company to because I believed he would protect it. Who will you choose? I asked quietly. The woman who gave you life, or the one who is using you? The silence stretched. Simone's breathing grew shallow. Vincent's jaw tightened. One step. My son took one step toward me. It was everything. He did not speak. He did not need to. That single step said what words could not. He was choosing. Not fully, not completely, but he was choosing. Simone saw it too. Something shattered behind her eyes. She reached into her clutch and pulled out an envelope. Inside, I glimpsed a document. Official letterhead. My signature at the bottom. A signature I had never written. Fine, she said. Her voice was ice over broken glass. Then everyone sees this. Tonight. She turned toward the door that led back to the main hall. The document that would announce my voluntary retirement. The forged signature that would transfer everything to her control. She was going to present it now, in front of 500 witnesses, before I could stop her. I did not try to stop her. I let her go. I watched her push through the door, envelope in hand, heading for the stage where 500 guests and 30 journalists waited. Renata's warning echoed in my mind. Let her commit to the lie publicly. The trap was about to spring. I just had not expected to be standing this close when it did. I found a shadow near the service entrance and watched my daughter-in-law climb the stairs to steal my life's work in front of 500 witnesses. The stage lights caught the sequins on her dress, a dress from our 2019 collection, another piece of my work she wore like a trophy. She took the microphone from the stage manager and smiled at the crowd with the radiance of someone who believed she had already won. Thank you all for being here tonight, Simone said. Her voice filled the hall, amplified and warm. This marks the beginning of Maison Elara's bold new chapter, one I am honored to lead. The crowd applauded, champagne glasses clinked, photographers repositioned for better angles. I pressed my back against the cold wall and watched. But first, she continued, I must address the elephant in the room. The rumors about our founding designer. My name hung unspoken in the air. She did not need to say it. Everyone knew who she meant. Eleanor Ashford built something remarkable. A legacy that spans 4 decades. A vision that changed fashion. She paused, letting the praise settle. But even visionaries must eventually rest. She spoke about me in past tense. I was already a ghost to her. Eleanor personally asked me to carry her legacy forward, Simone said. She signed the transfer herself. Some have questioned this transition. Tonight, I put those questions to rest. The lie flowed from her lips as smoothly as water. She had practiced this speech. She had probably rehearsed it in front of mirrors, adjusting her expression, perfecting the balance of humility and triumph. She needed the validation of this crowd more than she needed the company itself. That was her weakness. That need to be seen, to be applauded, to be believed. Let me tell you something about patience. It does not mean waiting. It means knowing exactly when to stop waiting. Simone reached into the envelope she had carried from backstage. Her fingers extracted a single document, official letterhead, formal language, a signature at the bottom that looked exactly like mine. "For those who doubted," she said, "here is the proof." Before I tell you what Simone held up to those cameras, are you still with me? Comment A if you think she will get away with this, or B if you believe the trap is already set, and tell me why in just a few words. Please note, the next part includes some details adapted for narrative impact. The lesson is what matters. She raised the document high. The stage lights illuminated every line. Camera flashes exploded across the hall. 30, 40, 50 bursts of light capturing the moment. 500 witnesses watched her display what she claimed was my signature, my blessing, my voluntary surrender of everything I had built. Her signature, Simone announced. Her blessing, her choice. The crowd erupted in applause. Standing ovation from the front rows. Board members nodding with relief. Fashion editors typing notes into their phones. Every major publication in the industry was documenting this moment. Every camera flash was a nail in her coffin. She just did not know it yet. I watched from my shadow as she accepted the adulation. She was magnificent in her certainty. She believed she had won. She believed this document, this forged testament to a conversation that never happened, would seal her control forever. But I had learned something about forgery in 40 years of business. The paper could be perfect. The signature could be flawless. But ink has a chemistry that does not lie. And the document Simone was waving in front of 500 witnesses had been created 6 days ago, not 3 weeks ago, as the date claimed. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I slipped it out, angling the screen away from any nearby eyes. Bernard's message, forensic document analyst confirmed. Signature dated 3 weeks ago, but the ink is 6 days old. We have her. I typed back. Every journalist in New York just photographed the evidence. His response came immediately. Friday morning, signing meeting. We end this. On stage, Simone was still basking in applause. She had no idea that the document she was so proudly displaying had just become the centerpiece of a fraud case. She had no idea that every photograph being taken would serve as evidence of her crime. She had no idea that by forcing this moment tonight, by accelerating her timeline, because Vincent had taken one step toward me, she had walked directly into the trap I had been building for 2 years. I slipped out the service entrance into the Manhattan night. The air was cool after the heat of the crowd. Behind me, I could still hear the muffled sound of applause, the music resuming. The celebration of a victory that would be very short-lived. Tomorrow morning, Simone would learn what happens when you forge the signature of a woman who built an empire. Tomorrow morning, she would learn that the woman she had voted to exile still held every card that mattered. Tomorrow morning, everything would change. I hailed a cab and gave Bernard's hotel address. We had less than 12 hours to prepare. The signing meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. By 11, Simone Ashford would understand that she had never been in control at all. The cab pulled into traffic. I watched the Metropolitan Club recede in the rear window. The trap was set. The evidence was locked, and my daughter-in-law had just provided 500 witnesses to her own destruction. The cab dropped me at Bernard's hotel just before midnight. We spent 2 hours reviewing documents, confirming the forensic analysis, preparing for the morning. By the time I returned home, the city was silent and my phone was dark. Then it rang at 2 a.m. My son's name on the screen, a name I had not seen there in 3 years. I answered, "Mom." Vincent's voice was raw, broken. The voice of a man who had spent the hours since the fashion show realizing exactly what he had been part of. I did not know. I swear to you, I did not know about the forged document. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone pressed to my ear, and listened to my son cry. "She told me you signed it willingly," he said. "She told me you wanted to step back. She told me," his voice cracked, "she told me you were confused, that you did not remember things clearly anymore." I believed her. Mom, I believed her over you. The words should have hurt. They did hurt, but they also explained everything. The vote, the raised hand, the eyes that would not meet mine. My son had been told his mother was losing her mind, and he had believed it because believing meant he did not have to choose. My son, crying, asking forgiveness. I had waited years for this call. I believe you, I said. The silence on the other end stretched for 3 heartbeats. You do. I believe you did not know about the forgery, but Vincent, I let the pause carry weight. I cannot stop now. What she has done goes beyond one document. I have to see this through. I understand. His voice steadied slightly. I just needed you to know. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I closed my eyes. Meet me tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., the cafe on Columbus. Bring Celeste. 5 hours later, I sat at a corner table with coffee going cold in front of me. Vincent arrived first, eyes red from sleeplessness. Celeste followed 2 minutes later, her blue notebook clutched to her chest. She sat down and placed the notebook on the table without a word. 3 years of entries. Every dismissal, every slight, every moment I had been erased from my own family's conversations. Vincent picked it up. He began to read. I watched my son's face as he turned the pages, watched the color drain, watched his jaw tighten and release, and tighten again. Celeste's notebook was a courtroom transcript written by a child who understood everything the adults had refused to see. When he finished, he set it down carefully. His hands were shaking. What do you regret most? I asked. He looked at me. His eyes were wet. Letting you sit alone in that corner, he said, at the board meeting. Watching you disappear into the shadows while everyone applauded her. And doing nothing. Not the business, not the money, not the acquisition or the company or the deal. His deepest regret was watching his mother be erased and staying silent. That is enough, I said. He blinked. Enough for what? Enough for me to know you are still my son. At 9:30, I walked into the conference room at Harrington and Wolff. Bernard was already there. Documents spread across the mahogany table. Jacqueline stood by the window, phone to her ear, confirming final details with someone on the other end. Paris legal team is standing by, she said, ending the call. They are ready to void the acquisition contract the moment we provide evidence of material fraud. Bernard slid a folder toward me. Clause 19B, buried on page 34 of the acquisition agreement. Any transaction exceeding $10 million requires authenticated founding designer signature. Without it, the buyer, in this case, Simone, personally, since she signed the guarantee, faces a penalty. How much? $12 million. $12 million. That was the price of Simone's arrogance. The forensic analysis is complete, Jacqueline added. The document she displayed last night was created within the past week. The ink composition does not match any signature sample from 3 weeks ago. It is definitive proof of forgery. I looked at the evidence assembled on the table. The original 1984 founding documents, the forensic report, the photographs from last night's fashion show, the trademark filing, the fabricated credentials. 18 months of conspiracy laid bare in manila folders. What about criminal charges? I asked. Commercial fraud, forgery, wire fraud if she transmitted any documents electronically. Jacqueline's voice was clinical. Enough for a referral. Whether the DA pursues is their decision, but the civil case is airtight. Bernard gathered the documents into his briefcase. The latches clicked shut with a sound like a verdict. Jacqueline checked her watch. 9:47. The signing meeting starts at 10. 13 minutes. 13 minutes to walk into a room where Simone sat triumphant, believing she had won. 13 minutes to end the career of a woman who had spent 18 months trying to erase me from my own legacy. I stood. We go in. Bernard and Jacqueline fell into step beside me. We walked out of the conference room, into the elevator, through the lobby, and onto the Manhattan street where a car waited to take us to Maison Ilara headquarters. Simone had no idea what was coming. She was probably rehearsing her victory speech right now, preparing to finalize the acquisition she believed was already hers. In 13 minutes, she would learn otherwise. The car delivered us to Harrington and Wolff at 9:58. We took our positions in the conference room at 9:59. Simone arrived at 10:01, already 2 minutes behind schedule for the meeting that would end her career. Her smile died the moment she walked through the conference room door and saw me sitting in the founding party's chair. I had chosen that seat deliberately. The leather was cold beneath my hands. Bernard sat to my left, Jacqueline to my right. The mahogany table stretched between us, and the empty chairs on the opposite side, chairs that would soon hold Simone and whatever legal team she had brought to finalize her stolen victory. What is she doing here? Simone's voice was sharp. She stood frozen in the doorway, her lawyer hovering uncertainly behind her. "Please, sit down," Jacqueline said. Her tone was professional, almost pleasant. "We have much to discuss." Simone did not sit. Her eyes moved from me to Bernard to Jacqueline, calculating, searching for the traps she could sense but not see. "She has no business at this meeting," Simone said. "The transfer documents were signed weeks ago. This is a formality." "Per the Maison Elara corporate charter," I said, "any acquisition exceeding $10 million requires the authenticated signature of the founding designer. That would be me." Simone's jaw tightened. "You already signed." Did I? She had walked into my building for years. Now she had walked into mine. Simone pulled out a chair and sat down hard. Her lawyer, a man in an expensive suit who looked increasingly uncomfortable, took the seat beside her. He opened his briefcase and extracted a familiar document. "As you can see," the lawyer said, sliding the paper across the table, "Eleanor Ashford signed this transfer voluntarily 3 weeks ago, witnessed and notarized. This meeting is indeed a formality." I looked at the document without touching it. My signature at the bottom, my name typed beneath it, a date from 3 weeks ago. A forgery I had never written. Simone's confidence had returned. She sat back in her chair with the expression of someone who believed she had already won. The document was perfect. The signature was flawless. She had probably paid someone very talented to create it, but she had made one mistake. She had assumed I would not fight back. "Jacqueline," I said. Jacqueline opened her own briefcase and extracted a folder. She placed it on the table and slid it towards Simone's lawyer with the same clinical precision he had used. "Forensic document analysis," Jacqueline said, "conducted by Dr. Harold Fairmont, certified by the American Society of Question Document Examiners. His findings are quite interesting." Simone's lawyer opened the folder. His face went pale before he finished the first page. "The ink used in the signature," Jacqueline continued, "was manufactured in 2024. That much is consistent with the claimed date. However, the chemical composition indicates the ink was applied to paper within the last 7 days, not 3 weeks ago. 6 days. The ink was 6 days old." Her entire lie collapsed in 2 sentences. "Furthermore," Jacqueline said, "the paper stock matches a batch delivered to Maison Elara headquarters 6 days ago. The delivery manifest is included in the appendix. And the signature itself," she paused. "Dr. Fairmont compared it to 17 verified samples of Mrs. Ashford's handwriting. The pressure patterns are inconsistent. The letter formations show hesitation marks. This is not Eleanor Ashford's signature." Simone's face had gone white. Her lawyer was whispering something urgent in her ear, but she did not seem to hear him. "This document is a forgery," Jacqueline said, "created within the past week, presented to 500 witnesses at last night's fashion show as genuine, photographed by 30 press outlets, and now submitted to this meeting as the basis for an $85 million acquisition." The room fell silent. I could hear the clock on the wall. I could hear Simone's breathing, shallow and fast. Did she think I built an empire without learning how to protect it? "This is," Simone started. "Fraud," Bernard said. His voice was calm, final. "Commercial fraud, forgery, potentially wire fraud, depending on how the document was transmitted. My legal team in Zurich has already prepared a criminal referral for the Manhattan District Attorney's Office." Simone's lawyer closed the forensic report and pushed back from the table. "I need to confer with my client privately." "Of course," Jacqueline said. "But before you do," Bernard slid one more document across the mahogany surface. "There is also the matter of Clause 19B, he said. "Page 34 of the acquisition contract you signed 6 months ago. Perhaps you remember it." Simone stared at the document without touching it. Clause 19B requires the authenticated signature of the founding designer for any transaction exceeding $10 million. Bernard continued. Without that signature, the acquisition cannot proceed, and the acquiring party, that would be you, Mrs. Ashford, since you personally guaranteed the contract, faces a penalty. He let the silence stretch. $12 million, Bernard said, payable within 90 days. That is the price you agreed to pay if this deal fell through due to failure to secure required signatures. Simone's lawyer grabbed the document and began reading frantically, but I could see from his face that he already knew. He had missed the clause, or he had assumed it would never matter. $12 million, personally guaranteed, due in 90 days. Simone looked at me across the table. For the first time since I had known her, she had nothing to say. Simone's chair scraped back so hard it hit the wall. She stood, shaking, and pointed at me with a trembling finger. "Someone told you," she said. Her voice cracked on the words. "Someone in my office told you everything." The $12 million penalty had broken something in her. The careful composure, the practiced smile, the camera-ready poise, all of it shattered in that single moment of realization. She was exposed. She was trapped. And now she wanted to know who had betrayed her. "Who?" she demanded. "Who did this?" I let the silence stretch for 3 heartbeats. "The assistant you underpaid 30% and dismissed as junior for 3 years," I said. "The one whose ideas you took credit for. The one whose mother's business you destroyed 5 years ago." Simone's face went from white to gray. The conference room door opened. Renata Vance walked in carrying a thick manila envelope. She did not look at Simone. She walked directly to Jacqueline and placed the envelope on the table. 18 months of documentation, Renata said. Her voice was steady. Emails, internal memos, recorded conversations, everything. 18 months. Renata had been waiting 18 months for this moment. Simone lunged toward her. "You." Bernard stepped between them. His 71-year-old frame blocked Simone's path with surprising firmness. "Sit down," he said, "or I call security now instead of later." Simone's lawyer, the one who had been frantically reading Clause 19B, stood up and closed his briefcase. "I cannot continue to represent you in this matter," he said. His voice was flat, professional, the voice of a man cutting his losses. "Given the evidence presented, there are significant conflicts that prevent." "You are fired," Simone spat. I was withdrawing. He walked out without looking back. Jacqueline opened Renata's envelope and began laying documents across the table. Email printouts, memo screenshots, transcripts of conversations with timestamps. "March 15th, Jacqueline read aloud. Email from Simone Ashford to outside counsel. Subject line, signature options. Quote, handle the founding designer signature problem. I don't care how. End quote. Her lawyers left like rats abandoning a sinking ship, quiet, quick, and without looking back. Simone stood alone at her end of the table. No counsel, no allies. Just the mounting pile of evidence that proved every lie she had told for the past 18 months. "This is fabricated," Simone said, but her voice had lost its conviction. "She forged these documents. The metadata is intact," Renata said calmly. "Server logs confirm every timestamp. Your IT department keeps excellent records." Bernard reached into his own briefcase and extracted a final document. The paper was yellowed with age, the typeface unmistakably from another era. He placed it on the table with the reverence of someone handling history. "The original founding charter," Bernard said. "Drafted September 1984, retrieved from my vault in Zurich last week." I watched Simone's eyes move to the document, watched her read the names at the top, watched her understand, finally, exactly how badly she had miscalculated. Both founding partners retain veto power over any transfer of controlling interest. Bernard continued. "Both signatures required. My name is still on this document. My 8% stake has never been transferred. Let me tell you what real power looks like. It looks like patience. The trademark registration you filed 18 months ago," I added, "was submitted without the required signatures of both founding partners. It is void. It has always been void. You never owned what you thought you stole." Simone's breathing had become ragged. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an exit, an ally, a weapon. finding nothing. "This cannot be legal," she whispered. "This cannot be." "It is entirely legal," Jacqueline said. "The Maison Elara Charter has never been amended. The founding documents supersede any subsequent filings. Your trademark claim, your transfer documents, your acquisition authority, all of it built on a foundation that does not exist." Simone lunged across the table. Documents scattered. Coffee cups flew. Her hands reached for the original charter, like she could somehow destroy the evidence by touching it. Security guards materialized from nowhere, 2 of them, pulling her back, restraining her arms. She struggled against them, screaming something incoherent about lawyers and rights and how none of this could be happening. But then her eyes found the doorway. Vincent stood there. He must have arrived during the chaos. He wore the same suit he had worn to the cafe that morning. His face was pale. His jaw was set. "Vincent," Simone's voice changed, desperate now, pleading. "Vincent, tell them whose side you are on. Tell them I did this for us, for our family." The room went still. Every eye turned to my son, the man who had raised his hand against me at the board meeting, the man who had texted apologies at 2 a.m., the man who had read his daughter's notebook and cried over what he found there. "Tell them," Simone screamed. "Tell them you support me. Tell them this is all a misunderstanding." Vincent looked at his wife. Then he looked at me. He did not speak. He did not move. The silence stretched until it became its own answer. Simone's face crumpled. The security guards loosened their grip slightly, sensing the fight draining out of her. "Vincent," she whispered, "please." My son still said nothing, but his feet moved one step, then another, until he stood beside me. The room held its breath, waiting for my son's next move. But I already knew. I had seen his eyes when he walked through that door. I had seen the man my son used to be, the man I had hoped he still was. Vincent stood beside me. His shoulder nearly touched mine. He did not speak, but his presence said everything. Simone stared at her husband from across the room. She just to play the security guard still holding our arms. Her face cycled through disbelief, rage, and something that might have been grief. "Vincent," she whispered, "after everything I did for us." "You did it for yourself." His voice was quiet, steady. Everything was always for yourself. The security guards released her slowly. She did not lunge again. The fight had drained out of her the moment Vincent chose his side. My son stood beside me. After everything, my son stood beside me. I let the silence settle. Then I reached into Jacqueline's folder and extracted one final document. "There is one more thing," I said, "before we discuss what happens next." Simone's eyes focused on the paper in my hands. Fresh fear flickered across her face. "Your design degree," I said. "The Académie Lumière in Paris. The one that qualified you to call yourself creative director of a fashion empire." She said nothing. "It does not exist." I let the words land. "The school is a website and a mailing address in Delaware. Your entire creative authority, 5 years of claiming expertise you never earned, is built on a fabrication." The color drained from her face completely now. This was the one secret she had believed was buried too deep to find. The foundation of everything she had claimed to be. "I could release this," I said, "along with the forensic evidence, the trademark fraud, the forged signature. I could ensure that every fashion publication, every industry contact, every person who ever believed in you learns exactly who you really are." Simone's breathing was shallow, rapid, the breathing of a trapped animal. "But I am not going to do that." She blinked. Confusion replaced fear. I handed her a door instead of a grave. That was the difference between us. "Leave quietly," I said. "Resign from Maison Elara. Do not contest the divorce. Do not attempt to salvage your position or your reputation through legal maneuvering. Walk away, and I will not pursue criminal charges. I will not release the credential evidence. I will allow you to rebuild elsewhere, in another industry, under your own name." "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Why would you do that?" "Because destroying you completely would take time and energy I would rather spend on my family." I paused. "And because my mother's name, the name you tried to steal, deserves better than being associated with your destruction." Simone looked at Vincent. He did not meet her eyes. She looked at Bernard, at Jacqueline, at Renata standing quietly by the door. No allies, no options, no escape except the one I was offering. "Fine," she whispered. "Fine." She walked out of the conference room without another word. The security guards followed her to ensure she left the building. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Sometimes winning means knowing when to stop. I gathered the documents and placed them back in Jacqueline's folder. Bernard squeezed my shoulder, once a gesture of solidarity that needed no words. Then he and Jacqueline began discussing next steps with Renata, voices low and professional. I walked into the hallway. Vincent followed. The corridor was quiet. Afternoon light streamed through tall windows, warming the polished floors. I could hear the distant sounds of the city below. Traffic, voices, the constant hum of Manhattan going about its business. "You did not destroy her," Vincent said. I turned to face my son. 42 years old, the boy who had counted stairs in my castle, the man who had lost his way and was trying to find it again. "I did not need to," I said. "She deserved it." Perhaps. But I did not need her destruction to reclaim what was mine. I paused. And I did not need her destruction to get my son back. Vincent's eyes were wet. He looked away, then back. "Thank you," he said, "for not giving up on me." I reached out and touched his face, the same gesture I had used when he was small, when he needed comfort after a nightmare or a skinned knee. He was 42 years old, but some things never change. "You are my son," I said. "I never gave up. I was just waiting for you to come home." He pulled me into a hug, brief but real, the first genuine embrace we had shared in years. Then we walked together toward the elevator, toward the lobby, toward the Manhattan noon light that waited outside. My phone buzzed as I stepped onto the sidewalk. Celeste's text, "Grandma, turn on the news. Someone leaked everything to the press." I smiled. I had not leaked anything. The evidence I held was staying in Jacqueline's files. But I knew someone who had 18 months of documentation and nothing left to lose. Someone who had watched Simone destroy her mother's business 5 years ago and had been waiting for this moment ever since. Renata had made her own choice about mercy. I could not blame her. Some debts require public payment. 2 weeks later, I sat in my apartment with a cup of tea and a stack of newspapers, reading about the systematic collapse of everything Simone Prescott had built on lies. Renata's leaked documents had done their work. Every major fashion publication had run the story. Every industry contact had seen the evidence. The woman who had stood on that stage waving a forged document was now the subject of criminal investigation and professional exile. The headlines told the story in fragments. Maison Ilara, creative director, never graduated from design school. That one ran in Women's Wear Daily, complete with a side-by-side comparison of her claimed credentials and the diploma mill investigation. Fashion house rocked by forgery scandal. The New York Times business section, 3,000 words on the acquisition that never was. Fraud investigation expanded to include wire fraud and forgery charges. A small notice in the legal section of the Wall Street Journal, but it told me everything I needed to know about what was coming. Simone had retained new lawyers. They were already negotiating with prosecutors. The trademark registration had been formally revoked. Her name had been removed from every Maison Ilara document, every press release, every company communication. Dominoes do not fall alone. They take everyone touching them down too. The 8 board members who had voted to exclude me, the 8 hands that had risen in that penthouse, faced their own reckoning. Carla Hendricks resigned from the restructured board within 3 days of the news breaking. Marcus Webb followed 2 days later. Thomas Reed, Margaret Holloway, Janet Woodford. One by one, they stepped down or were asked to leave. Their complicity had become public knowledge. The fashion industry has a long memory. The business world has an even longer one. Every one of them had gambled that siding with Simone was safe, that I would never fight back, that they would never face consequences for their raised hands. They had gambled wrong. Did they think I would stop at Simone? Did they think I had forgotten their raised hands? The board has been restructured to reflect the company's founding values, the official press release read. I had not written it. Jacqueline's team had. But I had approved every word. 8 resignations. 8 ruined reputations. 8 people who would spend years explaining why they had supported a woman who forged signatures and fabricated credentials. The industry would remember. The industry always remembers. Vincent came to see me on a Tuesday afternoon. He looked older than his 42 years, tired but clear-eyed. The fog that had clouded him for years seemed to be lifting. "The divorce papers are filed," he said. "It is done." I poured him tea. We sat together at my kitchen table, the same table where I had once helped him with homework, where we had celebrated his first job, where we had planned his future together. "I have been thinking," Vincent said, "about the company, about my role." "What have you decided?" 3 years of independent oversight. He met my eyes. "I requested it myself, from the Paris team." I set down my teacup. "You requested it. I need to prove I can be trusted, not just to you, but to everyone, to the employees, to the partners, to myself." He paused. "I let Simone make decisions I should have questioned. I let her convince me of things I should have seen through. I need to earn back the right to lead without supervision." My son asked for oversight. He wanted to earn trust the hard way. That was enough. "You will earn it back, Vincent," I said. "All of it." He nodded slowly. "I know it will take time. I know there are people who will never fully trust me again. But I would rather spend 3 years proving myself than spend the rest of my life knowing I took the easy path." I reached across the table and took his hand, the same hand I had held when he was 4 years old. Learning to count stairs. The same hand that had risen against me in that board meeting. The same hand that had moved him to stand beside me when it mattered most. "Your father would be proud of you," I said. Vincent's eyes grew wet. He did not speak. He did not need to. We sat together in silence, drinking tea, watching the afternoon light move across the Manhattan skyline. Some wounds take years to heal. Some trust takes decades to rebuild. But we had made a start. My phone rang as the sun began to set. Bernard's voice. "There is one more piece of business. The penalty clause. She cannot pay it. Her lawyers have been very clear. Even liquidating everything she owns, she cannot cover the amount. They are requesting a negotiated settlement." I looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Simone was facing the final consequence of her choices. The financial obligation she had signed without reading. The guarantee she had made without understanding. "I know she cannot pay," I said. "What do you want to do?" I thought about mercy. I thought about justice. I thought about my mother's name on a company I had built from nothing. I thought about 18 months of fraud and forgery and lies. "That is the point," I said. "Let me think about it." I hung up and stared at the skyline. The final decision was mine to make. Destroy her completely, or let her walk away with nothing but her freedom. Some choices cannot be rushed. I spent 3 days thinking about Simone's fate before Celeste arrived at my door with the notebook that had started everything. For the first time in months, my granddaughter was smiling. "I do not need this anymore," she said, holding out the blue notebook. "I need a new one, for what comes next." I took it from her hands. The cover was worn from years of use, the pages soft from being turned and returned. 3 years of observations. 3 years of a child watching her family and writing down what the adults refused to see. "Come in," I said. "I will make tea." We sat together at my kitchen table, the same table where I had planned the Alara protocol, where Vincent had read these pages and wept, where Bernard and I had mapped out our strategy. Now it held only teacups and a notebook full of truth. "Did you know," Celeste said, "that my middle name is Alara?" I set down my teacup. "What?" "Celeste Alara Ashford," she smiled. "Dad picked it. He said it was after his grandmother, your mother. He said it was the most beautiful name he knew. I had not known. Or I had known once and forgotten, buried beneath years of distance and disappointment. My mother's name, given to my granddaughter, passed down through my son without my ever realizing. 3 generations. The name had traveled through 3 generations without my knowing. The name found its heir, I said softly. It just took 3 generations. Celeste reached across the table and took my hand. 14 years old. With her father's stubborn jaw and my mother's name hidden in the middle of her own, I want to be a designer, she said, like you. I have been applying to Parsons for their summer program. You never told me. I wanted to earn it first, not because of the family name, because of the work. She paused. The way you did. I opened her notebook and began to page through it. Entry after entry, written in careful handwriting that had grown steadier over the years. Observations about family dinners, about boardroom conversations she had overheard, about the way her mother dismissed her grandmother with a wave of her hand. Celeste's notebook was a mirror. I saw myself through my granddaughter's eyes and finally recognized who I was. You saw everything, I said. Someone had to remember. Grandma, in case everyone else forgot. I closed the notebook and looked at the girl who had carried this weight alone for 3 years. The girl who had watched and waited and documented, not knowing if it would ever matter, not knowing if anyone would ever believe her. Thank you, I said, for remembering. 2 days later, I walked into the conference room at Harrington and Wolff for the final signing. The acquisition documents were spread across the table, the deal that Simone had tried to steal, now proceeding under proper authority. Bernard sat to my left, Jacqueline to my right. Across the table, the Maison Laurent representative waited with a pen. Before we begin, the representative said, I want to say something. He was a distinguished man in his 60s, silver-haired and impeccably dressed. We have done business with Maison Elara for 30 years. We thought we knew who we were working with. He paused. We are honored to finally know who you are, Mrs. Ashford. I looked at the documents in front of me. My name at the top, my signature line at the bottom. For the first time in 40 years, my full name would appear publicly on Maison Elara legal documents. Not hidden, not anonymous, real. Do you know what it feels like to write your own name after hiding it for 40 years? It feels like coming home. I picked up the pen. It was heavier than I expected. Or perhaps I was simply aware of its weight for the first time. I signed, Eleanor Ashford, founding designer, the invisible architect made visible at last. Bernard signed next, then Jacqueline as witness. The Maison Laurent representative added his signature with a flourish. The acquisition was complete. The company was secure. My mother's name would continue for another generation. So am I said to the representative, honored to finally know who I am, as I set down the pen. Bernard cleared his throat. There is one more document, he said. He slid a single page across the table. The waiver for the penalty clause. You said you wanted to review it personally. I looked at the paper. A simple form, a single signature line. The choice I had been avoiding for 3 days. Simone could not pay what she owed. Her lawyers had made that clear. Enforcing the full amount would mean years of legal battles, asset seizures, bankruptcy proceedings. It would destroy whatever remained of her life. Or I could sign this waiver, release the debt, let her walk away with nothing but her freedom. I thought about mercy. I thought about justice. I thought about my granddaughter, who carried my mother's name without ever being asked. I thought about my son, who was rebuilding himself one day at a time. I thought about 40 years of work, nearly stolen by a woman who could not tell the difference between ambition and theft. I picked up the pen. The choice was mine to make. Only mine. I signed the waiver. The pen moved across the paper, and I released the debt. Not because Simone deserved mercy, she did not, but because I no longer needed her destruction to feel whole. I had reclaimed my name, my company, my son. That was enough. 6 months later, I stood in an 18-square-meter Brooklyn kitchen and remembered why I had started all of this in the first place. The kitchen had not changed much since 1984. Same worn counters, same single window overlooking the street, same cramped space where I had sketched my first dress while the city hummed outside. The landlord remembered me. He had been surprised when I called, asking to rent it back. Simone started a small label in Los Angeles. I heard about it through industry contacts, a modest line, nothing revolutionary, but honest work, no stolen names, no forged signatures, just fabric and thread and whatever talent she actually possessed. I wished her well, from a distance. Vincent and I meet for lunch on the first Tuesday of every month now. We do not talk about business. We talk about Celeste, her school, her applications, her growing passion for design. We talk about his new apartment, smaller than the penthouse, but entirely his own. We talk about nothing important and everything that matters. Some battles end in destruction. Mine ended in lunch on Tuesdays and phone calls on Sundays. Bernard calls every week from Zurich. His voice sounds stronger than it did 6 months ago. He says retirement suits him better when he knows the company is in good hands. Some partnerships outlast everything distance time. Decades of silence. Ours had survived it all. I picked up a pencil and began to sketch. The design was nothing special. A simple silhouette, the kind I had drawn 1,000 times before. But my hand moved differently now. Lighter. Freer. For 40 years, I had designed for clients, for deadlines, for the relentless demands of an industry that never stopped wanting more. Today, I sketched because I wanted to. The kitchen felt smaller than I remembered. Or perhaps I was simply aware of its size for the first time, without the urgency of ambition to make it feel larger. 18 square meters. That was all it had taken to build an empire. That was all it took to remember who I was. The doorbell rang. I set down my pencil and walked to the door. Through the frosted glass, I could see a familiar silhouette. Celeste stood on the stoop, holding a white pastry box. Her cheeks were pink from the January cold, and she was smiling. "I brought breakfast," she said. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside and let her enter. She looked around the kitchen at the worn counters, the single window, the pencils scattered across the surface where I had been working. "This is where you started?" she asked. "This is where I started." She set down the pastry box and picked up one of my sketches. Her eyes moved across the lines, studying the proportions, the drape, the way the fabric would fall. "It is beautiful," she said. "It is simple. That is what makes it beautiful." She set the sketch down and looked at me. 14 years old, carrying my mother's name in the middle of her own. The heir I had never expected, arriving exactly when I needed her most. "What are you doing, Grandma?" Remembering why I started. She picked up a pencil, turned it over in her fingers, looked at the blank paper still spread across the counter. "Can I learn?" They tried to erase me. Instead, they reminded me why I mattered. I slid the rest of the pencils across the counter toward her. "I thought you would never ask." Celeste pulled up a stool and sat down beside me. She held the pencil the way I had taught myself to hold one 40 years ago, uncertain at first, feeling for the right angle, the right pressure. "Start with a line," I said. "Just one line. The rest will follow." Her pencil touched the paper. A single stroke. Hesitant, but determined. Then another, and another. Her hand steadied as she worked, finding its rhythm, discovering the joy that had pulled me into this world 4 decades ago. I watched my mother's name live on in my granddaughter's hands. Outside the window, Brooklyn hummed with the same energy it had in 1984. Traffic sounds, voices, the endless rhythm of a city that never stopped moving. I had built an empire from this room, then nearly lost it. Then fought to reclaim it. Now I was passing it forward. Celeste looked up from her sketch, a question in her eyes. "Is this right?" I studied her work. The lines were raw, unpracticed, but there was something there, a spark, a vision, the beginning of something that could grow. "It is a start," I said. "That is all any of us get, a start and the willingness to keep going." She smiled and bent back over the paper. I opened the pastry box and selected a croissant. The butter was still warm, flaking at the touch. I took a bite and watched my granddaughter learn to draw. Some things, it turns out, are worth waiting for. This was one of them. And to you listening to my story, remember this: invisibility is not the same as powerlessness. For 40 years, I stayed silent. I let others take credit because I thought humility meant disappearing. Do not make my mistake. Your voice matters. Your name matters. The moment you believe you are too old to fight back is the moment they win. This grandma story taught me that patience is not passivity. I waited, but I prepared. I documented. I built alliances. Some call this a revenge story, but I see it as reclamation. I believe God allowed this trial so my granddaughter could learn what I almost forgot, that our names carry weight, that our work has value, and that justice always arrives. If this grandma story touched you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below. Have you ever had to remind someone who you really are? And if this revenge story spoke to you, subscribe for more stories of quiet strength and dignity. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time means everything to me. A final note: some details in this grandma story have been adjusted for storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to real individuals is coincidental. What matters is the message it carries.